To this now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has apologized to the people of Alexandra for a 2019 statement in which he promised residents from the Johannesburg township they would benefit from a housing project to build 1 million houses. EFF leader Julius Malema prompted Ramaphosa to admit the mistake as he was responding to the questions in the National Assembly this afternoon. He reminded the president that the issue of housing has become so critical that a recent protest by evicted residents turned deadly, resulting in the death of EFF councillor Moshe Mphahlele.
We took care to go back to that recording and listened to it. And had a number of people in my office listening to it and interpreting it because ke boletse ka Sepedi. And to the extent, Honorable Malema, that it created this impression that I said 1 million houses for Alexandra, which objectively would not be possible anyway, because we just don't have the land there to build the 1 million houses. And to the extent that it created that impression, yes, I will say I apologize for having made people believe that I meant for Alexandra. What I really meant was, yes, we would want to build 1 million houses for the whole country. And as it turned out, of course, we never really reached even that target because of a whole number of issues.
Ramaphosa has confirmed that plans for the creation of a sovereign wealth fund have been put on hold due to the country's current fiscal challenges.
At present, with our current fiscal position, with substantial current account and budget deficits, it is currently not the most opportune and favorable time for us to establish a sovereign wealth fund. However, there are a number of options that are under consideration. Funding for service delivery remains under pressure for us. Additional resources are required to improve the recruitment of key personnel such as police and teachers. Yeah. We also need to increase investment in the maintenance of basic service maintenance, or infrastructure rather. In light of these realities, the most appropriate policy path for us is to use any additional resources at this moment to reduce the debt burden that our country carries and improve the delivery of services. Several countries use revenue from the exploitation of their natural resources to establish and sustain sovereign wealth funds. In our country, however, the public revenues or royalties that we derive from mineral resources have historically not been very reliable, or have they been very consistent. We have therefore suggested that one of the possible routes towards the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund is through the reform and consolidation of state-owned enterprises.
Now, political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi joins us for more on Ramaphosa's first Q&A session. Professor, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Let's talk about that first Q&A session specifically for the 7th administration, but also the first Q&A session under a GNU government. What did you make of that?
Good evening, and good evening to the viewers. Well, it's normal. The president responded like a statement to the questions that was posed to him. And if you look at the range of questions, the nature of the questions, it sounded like a State of the Nation address whenever I responded. But I believe that he responded to the question. There were some, very difficult moments where the president have to actually reflect and think a little bit deeper about his response to some of these questions. But overall, I believe that he presented the government quite well in terms of how he demonstrated, even where sometimes there were disagreement based on the reaction from some parliamentarians, that how he actually conducted himself. I strongly believe that he portrayed an image of a government in control, the so-called government of national unity, and perhaps that was a good start for the president.
Yes, Professor, you also mentioned that in some parts it did sound like a State of the Nation address. And in those SONA addresses, we do know that the president highlights some successes made, but also promises on future plans. One of those promises that have been made in the past was the idea of these 1 million houses in Alexandra, in Johannesburg. Now, he had to clarify those comments, almost backtracking as well. What do you think the people of Alexandra should make of that?
No, and especially if you have to backtrack, it's within the nature of politicians, let alone being a president, where promises will be made, and I believe when those promises can't be met for whatever reason, you need to go back to the communities or take the country into confidence to say there have been certain challenges that prevented us reaching this, and don't wait for a session like today. I think that for me is good governance. That for me will demonstrate that at least we've reached a stage where we are capable of not only making or ascending onto the platform where these promises are made, but we can also get our hands dirty in ensuring that some of these promises and plans, priorities that we set out for ourselves as a country are being met. And that for me was perhaps not one of the good things that emanated from today's question and answer session in Parliament, where the president have to labor the point that they actually have to look over and over to get some evidence whether he actually promised that. That for me was not good. And yes, perhaps it was also a bit of political point scoring, but this is the responsibility of parliamentarians to pose those kind of questions to our president and any leader for that matter, to demonstrate that they are at least holding the executive to account.
And while we're also speaking about backtracking as well, and I guess this one is a bit more of putting it on pause. He started off by speaking of course, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and there will be a bit of a pause on that, but giving the reasons for that too. What were your reactions to that?
Yeah, well, we should understand that by now there is undue pressure, and I believe that the presidency and even the ruling party is fully aware what is going to happen within the next couple of years with local government elections just being around the corner, whether it's now 3 or 4 years away. But we all know that is the next step in terms of our elections program in South Africa. And you would want to manage a situation. You would want to manage some of these challenges. And that's why I think the president handled the matters of today in that particular matter, so that he can also come across as somebody who are not only knowledgeable about the day-to-day challenges of that South Africans are facing, but he is taking a concerted, making concerted efforts to ensure that those challenges are addressed.
Professor, the approach of public-private partnerships, when the president was speaking about reforms when it comes to rail, when it comes to, of course, as well, just transporting goods to market as well, and the challenges that small business and big businesses also face when they have to transport goods, that we don't have a safe rail network, we've got poor road infrastructure as well, and of course our ports became a huge matter that he focused quite greatly on today. And also giving examples, for instance, the N3 and how that public-private partnership has worked, and now it will be all with the government and not necessarily just a public-private partnership, calling it one of the smart ones. But this was something that the EFF raised, saying that where they raised concerns and they questioned the private sector involvement in the president's plans to move particularly ports and rail forward, saying that if we are involving the private sector, it's almost handing over our assets that we shouldn't be, making an example of Eskom to say that, you know, there was much emphasis on public-private partnerships, but with a new leadership there, we've seen that load shedding has become, I mean, we don't want to say a thing of yesterday, but it's definitely something that has been much, much better in recent months.
Yeah, well, if you look at how other countries, first world countries, have supported the private sector and small emerging companies, but for that to happen, the environment, the business environment also have to be conducive. And we do have that. If you look at, you've got your CEDAs, we've got so many institutions that are supposed to be enablers of economic growth, business growth at your local level, at a micro level. But yet we all know some of these institutions, some of these SOEs are highly politicized establishment where a local individual, if it submits a proposal for a business, the next moment, it's a family member of a politician who runs with that. It is these kind of things at your local government level. Yes, it's fine what is happening at national level with all these policies and pronouncements that are being made, but I believe that where this will work quite well. Yes, public-private partnership, where it will work well, it's when you've also got a local government and local leaders that ensure that at the end of the day, it is your local small businesses in your townships, in small localities, your rural areas that benefit out of all this. And I think that will be a catalyst for many other industries to grow at your regional, district, and even at provincial level. But that in itself, it's a huge challenge if the ground at local government level is not fertile or conducive to try and promote and support local businesses.
So if we aren't getting it right at a local government level, the chances at national then become a little bit more bleak, Professor. When you're talking about the SOEs being highly politicized, one of the things the president said is that they're working to implement a centralized model for SOEs. Do you think that will perhaps help?
No, that will help. We had a decentralization of our local government that had been happening for some time. And in many other instances, but that will take some time. And I think also it's very good if we can start somewhere. We can blame the government for whatever, for being perhaps lax and very slow in taking such a decision that should have been taken in any case a long time ago. But I think that will, for me, will be a good starting point. But that needs to be, the political pronouncements needs to be followed up by the political will to ensure that there is implementation, and not implementation after yet another 5 years when, the government is under tremendous pressure. But even when things are going well, and yet once again constantly taking South Africans into confidence as some of the challenges and opportunities that are out there. But we need to get rid of this political red tape where people are really struggling to try and even start businesses because of this whole patronage system at local government level.
How far do you think we are in that quest to try and curb that as well? If you had to informally rank and rate the political will that is there currently in the 7th administration, as early as it may be, if 1 being dismal and 10 being excellent?
No, we've seen some concerted efforts, not only from the opposition, because I think what is also happening out there, it seems as if it's only opposition party or ministers from opposition parties that perhaps are setting the tone in terms of what is good governance. But I strongly believe the ruling party, the ANC, There are capable leaders, but there has been concerted efforts, and there has been glimpse of efforts towards ensuring that we create a very conducive environment for small and emerging enterprises, and also ensure that at your local level, because it's not only about creating a business opportunity, but it is also ensuring that people are living in safe environments, people are traveling or on roads that are conducive to do business. And I strongly believe that we have seen some concerted efforts about that. There are pockets of excellence, and for me, it's all about accountability. When people are held accountable, irrespective of what position they held, we will be able to see reap the benefits of some of these issues or principles of good governance.
Yeah, and there are pockets of excellence that can't be denied, but also an overall picture of some bleakness in some aspects as well. When the president was speaking, was asked about time frames in particular when it comes to the reform of rail and port entry as well. He couldn't give, he said he cannot give a particular time frame when we will be moving to a point where we have this great infrastructure. How much confidence can we have as ordinary citizens, let alone the business owners who need those infrastructures and those roads to be, and the railway and the ports to be working functionally, to be able to contribute to the economy as well? How much confidence can we have if we don't have time frames?
Yeah, well, it's just going to be very difficult. And I think that is one of the main challenges, that, some of these promises are being made, a pronouncement, without any time frames. And then yet the president, or whoever, any minister can come back and say, but look, I looked over the tapes and I looked for the evidence, and there was no indication of when will this target be reached. So that is a luxury that we perhaps can for now set aside. But what South Africans needs to do, we should never lose hope about the future of this country. That is something that we should never do. But while doing that, I'm not encouraging people now to go out in the streets to go and burn down. But we do have, engagement forums at your local government level. And it's for these business, local business people to organize themselves, engage with their local leaders. And I'm glad to announce that I've seen that in some of these small towns, rural areas, there are some of these efforts where they are organized labor, even emerging from that. But there should be pressure put on the government to try and adhere to some of the demands or the concerns of these local business owners.
Professor, thank you so much for your time this evening and sharing your insights with us.